Hello Internet and hello War of the Visions fans, I'm Jackie Fox, and today we're going to be talking about Veritas of the Waters, aka Folka, and how she got screwed over again because Gumi seems to hate her. I mean, really, why do you hate my girl so much? When she came out in FFB, when I first started playing, I think she was my first Veritas unit, and oh my god, I may have wanted Citra and Veritas of the Light, but I learned how to play Veritas of the Waters, and I fell in love with her. And she didn't scale up well, and over time she fell off pretty quickly, but she remained pretty usable in Arena for quite some time because of her unique ability to basically be a Marlboro in the middle of the battlefield, which ended a lot of other teams really quickly a lot of the time. It was a very easy way to cheese through Arena. But that aside, she's also a good, probably like the best representative of a type of units that I've always wanted to see in FFB. We've gotten a couple of these. I'm always excited when we get these. I mean, there's a couple recent examples in, say, I think Vivi and Helena of the Black Rose. There's also Sotley, obviously. More the Merrier recently got built up. But units that can really maximize faith by being able to inflict massive amounts of statuses, and a wide variety of them too, so that they're hard to resist. But they can also deal magic damage, which also benefits from that faith, and heal, and preferably even like be able to bring people back to life. Eventually, I guess we'll see that, but maybe getting full life on one of these guys is a little too much to ask. Although Sotley does have re-raise, so maybe it's not too much to ask. Anyways, I've always really wanted a character that could do all of these things, and I really feel like that would utilize the mage's potential to its utmost in a way that would actually make mages strong and competitive within War of the Visions. So, what's the problem? Well, when Folka was released, quote unquote, we still wouldn't be able to get the medals to unlock her for another couple of days. They made us wait until the following Monday. And since I've been in a cave for the last week, I missed the JP rollout. I only heard that it had something to do with the arena, or the arena shop, maybe more specifically. And I don't know if maybe people got that wrong before she came out, the way that I kind of did over here on the global side, and I just missed the update on that. But apparently, you have to play Arena pretty much every week for a couple of months to be able to get enough coins to unlock and fully upgrade this girl. And I mean consistently, 5 times a day at the very minimum. That's the first way you're getting tokens for her. But you can also get tokens at the end of the week, which I can't show you because we haven't had the end of a week yet. I mean, like, the bulk of the coins that I'm going to be able to get for her, I have to wait over a week until after she was released to even be able to get. There hasn't really been quite a precedent for this, except... No, even with the Selection Quest units, you did get them right at the very beginning. Like, this character is so hard to unlock initially. Not that it's particularly difficult or that it's going to be, like, something that all of you can't do. Every one of you could do it. You don't even have to be particularly high in Arena because you are getting those daily shards per day. And if that's the only way that you're getting her medals, and you should get some at the end of the week, regardless of how well you do. But that's like 35 a week. So maybe after 4 weeks you could unlock her and start getting her shards. Wow. And that just doesn't feel good. And JP has complained about it apparently for the last month, and I missed it. And, I'm going to complain about it for at least the next month until I've unlocked her. Because I would love nothing more than to be able to turn this video into a Folka showcase. And I'm not even sure that there's players on the JP side that have unlocked her. I'm not even sure I can pull JP footage to do a showcase, not even that it would be in the right language or that I would understand it properly. And that just feels bad. And look, if you're gonna give the lip service of saying that I'm a pillar of support to this community, why don't you be a pillar of support to this community and listen to me when I say that this doesn't feel good? And for water players and for anyone who's a fan of Veritas of the Waters, this feels like a slap in the face and it stings. Goomy, please make it stop. So, you know, with all of that being said, I'm going to try to pull it together, and we're going to talk about her as a character and as a unit after this. Now, I've already done this in a shorter video, so if that was enough for you, you don't have to watch this one. If you already got the drama in the dish, like and subscribe. I'll see you in the next one, but click the link in the description on the way out, you know. But for everybody else, stick around. Here comes the review. Actually, I think I'm going to have to cut the near and future units and put them in the next video, because I think I just need to spend this whole video talking about Volca. It's going to be a lot. I'm really going to go a bit more in depth into maybe how some of her skills might work together and how you might more effectively use her, and I'm also going to try to make this answer a lot of questions that you might be having as a newer player that tend to get glossed over when wotv content creators make these type of videos. So this is going to be a little bit longer, but expect everything to be explained in a bit more in depth and to answer questions that maybe you didn't even know you had yet. And it seems right enough that we would start with Volca, the Veritas of the Waters. Now, I did do a short take on this character, but let me talk just a bit more about why I think she's going to be a fun one to play around with. She looks like she has some anti-magic in her kit, although like a lot of the relevant magic users aren't really going to be super concerned with your spirit, but spirit is interesting to have. Also, for flavor reasons, I think it's very interesting that this becomes an upgrade to Forbidden Power. Without getting too far into Volca's lore, one of the reasons that she is so genuinely cruel in the FFP storyline, one of the cruelest members of the Veritas, is that she has kind of used this sort of like water technique, magic mirror kind of thing, to invert herself because she is a kind, loving soul, almost pacifistic. And she knew that to go to war, she would need to be basically the opposite of that. So she used forbidden magic to make her so much more powerful. So I think it's interesting that thematically that works. And also the decreased attack and non-attack skill time is really cool there as well. 350 is quite a bit. Chance to counter all damage and decrease water resistance and increase HP for self. So that's really cool. Usually you would see like one of these two things on a skill. Having both of those is really cool. Also, decrease water resistance, that's really not something you see super commonly. It's not very high, but I do believe this is the first like non-boss counter that does this, because as far as I remember, there are a number of water bosses that can actually do this kind of thing. Preemptive Revenge is pretty interesting. It is very short range though. It is gonna apply before damage, but I really don't think that this is gonna be the way to go for her. Even though it is magic scaling because it's Blade Soul, I think really the thing that messes this up the most is the range. And then chance to counter all damage, regen, and healing power. Sometimes this is alright. I don't think it's great here though because of how strong this counter is. Although it does technically have a limited range. Although at the same time, like, I would imagine that the range applies to this part of the skill. I would think that this part of the skill would still proc at a larger distance, but that's just me imagining. I don't have 12 weeks of PvP to figure out how to get this character to show her to you, so I guess I just have to guess. So Undertow is going to give us a way of inflicting confusion, albeit at a short range, and for a very, very low AP cost. we have double re-raise, which is going to be very similar to... Actually, I think that this is basically with the decreased chance of being... No, I think Sottly's gives the other thing an increased chance of being targeted. So it kind of makes the auto-revived unit into your tank. Whereas this makes her less likely to be targeted, which I'm pretty sure is the way that Shalza's double courage works. So this is a really good skill on a support. We have seen the same type of skill be really, really important for Shalza. Even though she's a 70 cost unit, she is very, very powerful and has strong synergies. So I would say, especially since a lot of that is kind of based on that skill, that there is a very high chance that this skill is really, 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 really good. Now, the fact that this is a water unit doubling down on re-raise obviously makes this character's matchup with Alaya the Alabaster incredibly bad. Just really bad. Really, really bad. Especially because Alaya the Alabaster has ways of picking this apart. She has elemental resistances. She has the ability to use elemental weaknesses to target this character. Also, she has paralyze and that type of... She has some status in her kit, which might actually kind of backfire onto a character like this. Or really any mage, but... But also, Alaya the Alabaster is like the Cadillac of being able to be anti-re-raise. And like in a way that is even powerful enough that even with re-raise removal sealing skills, it's still more often that Alaya is going to get the better of your re-raise team. So, on one hand, this character is really weak to her weakness, essentially. But that's not the worst thing in the world. If you're already going to lose that matchup, why not lose it absolutely? You know what I mean? I think that this, likewise, is a really good tactic anytime you're not going against Alaya the Alabaster, which is a lot of matches. So, while there is one unit that definitely laughs in the face of, like, this build for her, it's still very good. It's not impervious, even against popular characters right now. Calamitous Splash is going to decrease evasion rate by 40 before dealing damage. This is important because this will actually help the skill hit. 220 mod means it's going to hit really hard. It's going to then dispel haste, decrease AP by 15, decrease all attack resistance by 15, basically damage resistance down by 15%, and disable CT up for 3 turns. Now, again, because Alaya the Alabaster is CT down, while you might be thinking, oh yeah, Alaya has some CT shenanigans, maybe this will help. Nope, really doesn't. But there are a lot of other teams that this will help against. My water team, for instance, I think is, and actually has been for a while. And also, in a way, there's a lot of other water units that I can swap in to give it even more CT up. Or to give it different characters with CT up. I guess what I'm saying is there's a lot of options for CT up with water. There's also a lot of options for magic with water. So, in a way, especially with this skill, this feels a little bit anti-water, although there are, again, definitely other characters that utilize CT up. You could look at, like, there's fire units that use this. There's definitely earth, like Bradley's a really bad one for doing this. But, you know, I'm thinking about, like, Astrius and Perrine and stuff like that as well for water. So there's a lot of characters that can mess with. But I don't want to say that like CT up is niche. It's definitely very powerful when it's used, but that also means that it's kind of given out a little bit more sparingly by the developers. So this is a little bit wishy-washy. love the water pun there, but this is that part of this attack is kind of wishy-washy. Though the fact that it decreases evasion rate, dispels haste, which is also really popular for evasion teams as a way of increasing their evasive potential, also decreases AP, also decreases all damage resistance by 15%. You can afford to have like another thing tacked on that's going to be really impactful sometimes, but usually not that impactful because this skill already does enough. That being said though, I kind of wish that it hit multiple targets. That's like my only complaint. Stuff that can be anti-evasion can really fall apart when you have multiple evasion units and your anti-evasion kit is single target. But this also is not a bad skill, and it's also not like just an anti-evasion skill as well. There are a lot of skills like that are like, you know, this is kind of a vanilla skill, but it has a guaranteed hit or something, and it hits one target or something, or it does one other thing. This does 4 other things in addition to its anti-evasive property. Additionally, having a 220 modifier is pretty cool as well. So there's a lot of fun stuff going on with this. Elemental power will reduce magic damage taken for 3 turns. I don't read this as being a shield, so like shield breakers shouldn't be able to remove this. This may just be a buff that can be dispelled though. Decrease all elemental resistance for 3 turns for ally, not self. Increase defense and spirit by 20 for 3 turns for ally, not self, and then all 3 of those effects for self as well. So Folka is going to be getting decreased magic damage, increased all elemental resistances, so basically decreased damage for the most part. There are non-elemental attacks that can get around this entirely, but basically. And then increased defense and spirit by 20 isn't bad. I will say again that there's a lot of newer characters that have that are a lot more reliable about getting around defense and spirit. Like defense penetration, spirit penetration have been a thing for a long time, and they've been slowly escalating over time. So increases to defense and spirit just aren't as good as they used to be, but they are still pretty good. When you upgrade the skill though, a lot of things just ramp up. The magic damage resistance does not. That stays at 50% max, but all elemental resistance goes up to 20%, which is awesome. Like, this is essentially, for you and the other character, the inverse of being hit by Oberon's LB. I think that's an 18% reduction across the board, or 20. This is the opposite of that, which is really cool. Also, worth noting that all elemental resistance stacks with any type of elemental resistance. So if you had 2 units that both apply to 25% increase to lightning resistance, for instance, those 2 things would not stack. You would not be able to get to 50% lightning resistance buffed, whatever, off of those 2 skills. However, if you had elemental resistance 20 and lightning resistance 25, you could effectively get to a buff of 45% lightning resistance. So all elemental resistance stacks really well with other characters that give specific elemental resistances, as this can give you a way of layering against elemental teams. However, again, especially with newer units, there have been a lot of characters that have gotten at least one non-elemental attack in their build to deal with situations like this. However, you should also know that that non-elemental attack is basically missing a certain amount of modifiers, and it's also missing a number of offensive capabilities. Usually, their power scale is a little bit lower. So even though there are a lot of characters that can kind of get around building for all elemental resistance, like you're not going to be able to walk around taking 1 damage like you might think you could, you are at least forcing your opponents to use their weaker skill set, and maybe that weaker skill set doesn't allow them to do some fun tech that your team needs to survive. You know what I mean? So moving on to the last skill before we go into the 120 stuff, we get Swift Current. Now this is going to have some AoE capabilities, finally, because I don't think that there's really been any AoE in this kit so far. Spirit Penetration for self, 40%, huge. Magic Attack Resistance Penetration, 40%, huge. Okay, both of these before damage too. So if you can get this girl to 60% Spirit Magic Attack Resistance Penetration somehow, before this lands, or before you get the skill off, then you would go to 100% Spirit and Magic Attack Resistance Penetration, basically making this skill unmitigated by anything but AoE resistance and water resistance. But it would knock out entirely Spirit Penetration, Magic Attack Resistance Penetration. To my knowledge, this is maybe one of the first characters to get a skill that increases both of the relevant penetrations for their attack at the same time. And also 40% is quite a big boost for these things. Like, it used to be that you would put one of these effects on a big bomb skill, but Folka is getting both on the same skill. It's only a 185 mod, but come on, if it were much higher than that, it would be truly ridiculous with those two conditions attached to it. Also, you get 4 uses of this, so you're just going to be slamming the shit out of people and basically keeping your Spirit and Magic Attack Resistance Penetration very high for a very long time. And this is also kind of showing off the thing that I was just explaining with the previous buff about how Spirit just ain't what it used to be. I also said that about one of her passives as well, and definitely her best passive, so oof. She invested a lot of her skill points into buffing her Spirit, and that's just not super relevant anymore. So finally, the job level 25 skill is going to be Mist. This was one of the ones that I really enjoyed from her kit in FFPE, so let's see what it does here. We are going to decrease water resistance by 25% for 3 turns for targets. Now this is going to hit in a diamond AoE, so this is going to hit a lot of people. And this is kind of like an LB level threat here. Also does this before dealing damage. So, and also when you combine it with this, like, because I did say that theoretically AoE resistance could mitigate the skill and water resistance could mitigate the skill. If you were in a situation where the water resistance was particularly high and these two things wouldn't alone really deal with their defenses, then it's likely that Folka would just use this skill and reduce their water resistance, unless that would also be a situation, like, unless they had built up all 3 of these things, which it's not really going to happen. And people don't necessarily build for like high elemental resistances necessarily, especially on like defense. And even when they do, you could just pick another element to get around that. Very easy kind of defensive strategy to counter, because it is kind of an eggs in one basket type strategy that makes you a little bit weaker to those other elements. Automatically cast another skill for self, Overflow, but also chance to inflict poison, 25%, chance to inflict paralyze, 25% for targets. Now it's going to hit a lot of people again. And this is really the skill that I'm looking at her for. This is the thing that makes my nerdy little heart happy in her kit the most. Because, and I know like poison is kind of underwhelming and paralyze isn't something that you usually think about being a huge deal. But at the same time, there is a very, very good chance, well, it is a little bit of a dice roll, very good chance that proccing paralysis is actually stronger than stop or other things. Or definitely a bit stronger than stun too, because you definitely have a chance of stunning them for like their next 3 turns. And at 80% chance, that feels pretty likely to get them for at least 2 out of 3. So this is like a super stun in a lot of ways. And I'm always surprised that Paralyze isn't a bigger threat in the game. And maybe it's just because there aren't as many skills that have like a high range with this. I mean, there are. I can definitely think of a couple that have big AoE Paralyze that still haven't really made their mark on the meta necessarily. But the fact that this also kind of has a backup plan of poison means that you've got to build for a lot of resistances to be able to kind of neutralize an attack like this. And I was kind of saying that earlier with you have to build a lot of resistances also to be able to deal with her spirit penetration, magic penetration, and ability to decrease your water resistance, not only with AoE skills, but with her counter skills as well. So building to make this character harmless against your team is incredibly difficult, kind of. I still think that Alaya the Alabaster could just like one punch this girl from across the map, which is unfortunate for her. And really, like, that's probably the best counterplay for something like this, because, you know, building to resist like all 5 of these things is just a ridiculous idea. Even all 4, if you kind of say, okay, well, I can deal with poison, that's fine. Even though that's going to be 45% of your health, you know? I think these are supposed to be percentages. I think that's how that works. So 15% of your health for 3 turns. It's not great, but it is kind of like an inverse and even stronger, like, anti-regen. So, you know, if regen is cool, then this is at least pinging people. Also, 4 Cassier, so she can just spam this as well if she wants. But if those status effects weren't enough, we also have Mind Blast. Not as big of an AoE, and kind of unfortunately that it doesn't do a lot of other things. Oh, no, I need to look at Overflow. Okay, before that. Oh, Overflow is CT up. It's a CT up. Okay, so hold up. You remember how I was saying that I was talking about how it's funny, right? That this particular condition on her seems like it would be most relevant to making her an anti-water unit. It even works against herself. Okay, cool. So she's gonna overflow at something near her. Okay, cool. And then she has Isunaga, which is really interesting for her. There's a number of places, and there's a number of types of, like, I'm not sure how true it is anymore, but there's a lot of types of, like, nightmare content where one of the things that actually makes it a nightmare is that you get hit by a lot of status ailments. Maybe not these 4 particularly, but Charm can be really fucked. Doom can also be kind of... These can be issues, but, you get hit with other status ailments, really, like, just, you get hit with Marlboro's Breath or something really early in the fight, and one of the best strategies is to have a good support stand, like, way out of range of the bullshit and cast this on your party after that happens, because usually if you can deal with that first interruption to your strategy that would completely shut you down, then you have a chance in the fight. And I think it's also really interesting to show that in addition to be a status inflictor, she can also be a status remover. That being said, I don't really like this sub-job for her. Big surprise, I usually don't like those. Let's look at Blade Soul. Sword Tongue formation is interesting. She's not really going to get much slash outside of this job though, so like a lot of characters that get Blade Soul, it pumps the Blade Soul sub-job stuff. But on most magic characters, the slash attack really isn't going to do a lot for them. So really, you want to be running Sword Song formation if you need that buddy buff, but also if you also have other slash units on your team that are going to make better use of that buff. Also, it helps with critical rate, and that becomes, you know, important for a lot of characters. It's also important specifically for Blade Souls. Magic Buster just sounds like a skill that she would have. It also gives her attack and magic debuffs, which feels very on flavor for her. The debuffs, though, in this game for stats like this aren't particularly powerful. Like 39% sounds like a lot. At this point, it does seem like that. But the way that these are actually applied kind of neuters them a lot. So, in that, I don't think you can deal with like, or it's only a debuff to someone's base stats, and you get additional stats from so many other places, especially now, that your base stats aren't the biggest piece of the puzzle. So like really, this has a far smaller effect than you really think it does. It's maybe, I don't know, 10% instead of really like 39%. So while this does look really cool, and while, you know, newer players might be really impressed by this, even reading it out here, it's not as strong as you think it is. It is still useful, and like I really like, was it Double Destruction or something like that with Roth's kit that inflicts like all 4 of these at the same time in a massive AoE pattern. You know, this is only hitting 1 character and it's only doing 2 of them, so it's just not great. Slate Wiper, though, this is the one that really needs the critical, because this is going to dispel all buffs in an AoE pattern if you land a critical. Otherwise, it's going to dispel haste. It will also dispel physical and magical damage increases when performing a critical hit. This is also kind of a mechanic that's gotten more and more common over the last couple of years, at least since, I want to say since like Hope, since Final Fantasy 13, the first run. So definitely interesting if you can land the critical. It's not very powerful though, and it may not, again, being slash, like when we're looking at skills that are going to be powerful after this, the Blade Soul stuff will definitely benefit from Spirit Penetration. So following up with Swift Current with the Slate Wiper is going to benefit from the Spirit Penetration for sure, but you're going to need slash attack penetration for these skills, and that magic attack penetration really isn't going to work for you. This is another thing that I think a lot of newer players have a lot of trouble conceptualizing, is the idea that magic attacks are a type of attacks. They're not all magically based attacks, because you can have a magically based spear attack that is not a magic attack. You can have a magically based slash attack that is not a magic attack. It's just based in your character's magic skill, but it is not so much a magic attack. You know, you're channeling that magic through something else. It's not like you're throwing raw magic at someone, I guess. That's how I make sense of it in my head, at least. So then we have Brave Breaker. This is going to be a 165 mod, really quite short range actually, but decreases bravery 40 when performing a critical hit for a target. This bravery actually does a lot of things for characters. This isn't a super great strategy. You're probably not going to turn anyone into a chicken, for instance, with this, but it does make them generally weaker in a way that is actually probably kind of comparable to Magic Buster, just with a bigger modifier, but also kind of less range. I don't know. I don't really like either of these skills, really. Like, bravery reduction just isn't the greatest strategy in battle. It's a little slow to actually get the benefit that you want, which is turning your opponent into a chicken. Finally, for Blade Soul, we have Counterman Slash. Reduce counter chance 100% for 3 turns for targets. Very cool. Especially against any number of newer characters that have, say, 70% counter chances, or any of the new, like, really strong modified counters. But also, it does this before dealing damage. So even if they have a preemptive counter, because it turns that off before it does damage, and it doesn't trigger the counter until it does damage, this attack is functionally uncounterable even by preemptive counters. In addition to that, as an additional 30% hit chance, and it decreases critical evasion by 25 for 3 turns for targets. This, while it is usually not an attack that I'm a big fan of, I love this girl, so I want to go just a little bit more in depth on how you might strategically use this in combination with her main job. So Counterman Slash, remember, gives us that additional 30% hit chance, but we can also use this after a Calamitous Splash, which is going to decrease their evasion rate by 30%. So essentially, we can decrease evasion rate by a full 70%, basically giving us an increased 70%-ish chance of hitting a character. Now, that's not from 0. Like, if you're seeing a 0% chance of hitting a character, this isn't necessarily going to raise that to 70, because being negative doesn't, like, register in the system. It just shows as 0. So you could be like negative 75 and do both of these things and still end up with a 0 because you have a negative 5% chance of hitting them. And maybe this all depends on how accurate she is, and I'm not necessarily seeing like passives or anything. So hopefully like board stats and stuff give her a bit of accuracy. It does seem like she gets a bit of luck. I'd say she gets a pretty fair bit of luck. I would say that she's probably not likely to get that outclassed by an evasion unit, but it is possible. That is how that system works, and if you're a newer player to this game and you didn't understand that in depth, well, now you do. White Mage. So this is an interesting support job. It's very old, as you can tell from the name being one of those basic archetypal Final Fantasy things. It has been upgraded in some ways, and the skill that you're really going to like the most here is Kuriga. Kuriga is a very, both a high modifier heal, but also a very wide area of effect heal as well. These skills are going to benefit from the casting time reduction, maybe taking them down from a couple ticks to just the 1. Maybe even 0 if you find other ways of supplementing this. Kurata is also a Kuriga level heal in potency, decent range, but only hits 1 target. Unfortunately, Kurata especially can kind of overwhelm the brains of certain characters to where they just turn into a heal bot because they can't heal enough characters and they can't heal their team as fast as their team is taking damage because they don't have good AoE healing. Having Kuriga probably enables her to avoid that, at least until she runs out of Kuriga, because she will use Kuriga more effectively, and you know, that'll kind of solve some of those problems. But you may still turn Kurata off. I'm not a fan of Protect and Shell. I do like them as status effects, but I like them in situations where you're getting both of them and another benefit, or you're getting one of these skills on like 5 different characters potentially. Having them as single target effects, isolated all by themselves, I just don't think that they're quite powerful enough to really be a thing that I would super advise you to leave on. Like, I just think there's a lot of, especially for a new unit, like there's a lot of better ways you could use your turn than Protect or Shell. Cura, you're probably going to avoid that. Isuna, well, you aren't running a Sunaga, so I guess you still have that. It's single target. I don't like it as much. For a lot of characters, this is really the only way that they have to deal with, like, dispel all ailments. It's really pretty uncommon that you get Isunaga, actually. I think one of the first characters to get a skill like that was Superior Healing on Fina, of all places. And it was really helpful there. It comes with a heal, so technically better than Isunaga here. But I would say you leave Usana on just because when it comes in handy, when it works, it's good. And it's not a skill that you're going to get stuck in a loop as likely as just not being able to heal enough and being stuck in a Sisyphean healing loop, essentially. And it can happen to her. So, you know, there is stuff in there that's okay. I would say Raise isn't actually that good, and here's why. That is like a base percentage, and that does increase, especially if you're trying to revive a mage or someone with high faith. Especially when your character that is doing the reviving has high faith, then basically every white mage is going to have 97 faith. And this character, is a 97 faith character if I ever fucking saw one. Just no excuse not to do it. Run her at 97 faith. But that being said, even with those type of modifiers adding into this, it's just not good chances. Like, the chances of you wasting your turn casting this and getting bodied because of it are just too high for my personal acceptance. But with that, I've gushed and overflown about Veritas of the Waters enough. With all of that being said, thank you for joining me on the absolute roller coaster that this video ended up being. And I guess if you want to see the coverage of all those other units, I promise I'll make it faster than this. I just had a lot to say about Folka. Then we're going to be doing that in the next video, so tune in for that. Be sure to like and subscribe so that you get to see that. Even turn on those notifications, ring the bell, all that stuff. Check out the link in the description for access to more Jackie Fox content. And with all that being said, I'll see you in the next one.